Welcome everybody to one of our regular Create Centre hosted webinars. We at the Create Centre at the University of Sydney are working in the area of creativity in research, transforming education, health and well-being, engaging the arts. Of course, I missed that from the middle there. But first of all, I must make a note that I'm coming to you from unceded Gadigal land. Our guest tonight is all the way over from the UK, but most of us here, I believe, are on Australian Aboriginal territory. So if you'd like to put in the chat what country you're on, we are also, of course, that means on the land of the oldest continuous culture of storytelling, which of course is absolutely vital to the work that we believe in here at the Create Centre, which leads me to let you know about our guest tonight, our presenter, Professor Penny Hay from Bath Spa University, which sounds very soothing immediately right out of the gate there, but it gets better because Professor Hay is the Professor of Imagination, Creative Enterprise and Innovation and is responsible for such imaginative places as the House of Imagination, the Forest of Imagination, and the School Without Walls, all of which she will share with us today. Professor Hay, welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to see some familiar faces as well. Hi, Mary, all the way from Ireland. So, yes, thank you, Anna, and lovely to meet you just now, Robin. So, Anna and Michael asked me to talk today about our work in the UK, but it is also international, and I have got lots of connections, particularly in Melbourne, but I can come back to that at the end. So I prepared a presentation for you that will last about 45 minutes at the most, and then we can open up for questions, but do put some comments in the chat or questions in the chat. And it's a small enough group to have a really lovely discussion. And for those of you watching the film later, I hope you feel part of it too. So let me share my screen. So Anna invited me to talk about how aesthetic creative learning and artistic expression can help us to reimagine approaches to learning in spaces of possibility. So learning in spaces of possibility is an area of work that I've been very devoted to for many years. I've written several papers about spaces of possibility, but I've designed this presentation particularly in relation to kind of your work at the Create Centre. So I'll give you a little bit about my background. So to start with, I am a fan of Bob and Roberta Smith, and Patrick Brill is an artist who works mainly in the UK, but we share this commitment to art as our human right. And our mantra, together, we came across it separately, but together, that all schools should be art schools, no matter what the age or background. Every child and young person should have art as a human right. And I was also the lucky one. I trained in fine art and education, but I met Sir Ken Robinson when I was at art college, training to be a teacher. And then I carried on working with him for the rest of his life. And sadly, we lost him in 2020. But he said very clearly that it is through imagination that we can create worlds in which we live. We can also recreate them. And I often feel that Sir Ken is still like the owl on my shoulder. Really, all of our work is in his legacy. So I trained to be a teacher with all of the arts in my kind of repertoire, but I've specialised in working with children and young people who didn't really want to go to school. So I re-engaged them in their learning through the arts. And this is one example, and he's very happy for me to share his name. You may know Mikey Please designed the melting cakes off Bake Off, the UK show. But he's also co-directed more recently Robin Robin, the Aardman film. And he came to me when he was about 10 and he didn't really want to go to school. And I just said to him, "So, Mikey, what would you like to do?" And he said, I just want to make films and animations. I said, absolutely fine, let's do it. And last year he gave a presentation to my students at the university and was very happy to share his journey. So from 10, making films across the whole curriculum about everything, and then going to art college, went to Camberwell Royal College of Art, and then he won an Oscar, a BAFTA for one of his animations. And so now he's such a great role model. And I think that's where we need to think about, where children, young people are and how we meet them where they are, and how we show up for them, how we become a companion in their learning. So after working in the Southwest in the UK for 7 or 8 years, I then went to Glasgow and worked on a concept around the City of Imagination, which I've kind of brought back to Bath more in Sir Ken's memory. And then I spent most of the 90s in London. So I worked at the Institute of Education and Goldsmiths University. And I worked alongside amazing artists as part of the London Association of Art and Design Education, with Sheila Berman, her image on the left, and on the right, Yinka Shonabare. And I made a piece of work in response to then the national curriculum coming out in the UK, which I didn't particularly agree with, because philosophically there shouldn't really be a law to teach art. And I don't really agree with a prescriptive content-led curriculum. So I made a piece of work called This Is Not the National Curriculum. I recycled all the national curriculum documents and made them into sketchbooks for my young people. And then in the late 90s, I was still at Goldsmiths running the MA in Arts Learning, but I then worked at Tate Modern before it opened. So in that context, I set up these experimental sites of learning using obviously the beautiful installations here, in the case Yo-Yo Kusama's installation around infinity, but inviting children, young people in. So here on the left, the 8-year-old investigating a mathematical concept of infinity, but together, responding to Kusama's obsession with polka dots and co-creating the design and the learning experience together. So then I came back to Bath in 2000. And the reason I came back was actually to have my child, who's now 24, but with her, I travelled to Europe and I studied the practice in Reggio Emilia in Italy I'm now still in touch with them 25 years later. So they have the view which inspired our charity, where children are creative from the moment of birth. So the image of the child is full of competence and creativity. And you can see there on the left, a young child painting with her own fascinations, and on the right, children dressing up. They've just been to the aquarium to take a film of the shark in the water, but coming back dressing up with flippers and masks, and then being back in that kind of experience. So eat your heart out, Damien Hirst, the possibility of dying. And that was really when we set up the charity. So the charity was initially called 5 by 5 because it was 5 artists, 5 galleries, 5 schools, but now we work with all ages, so 0 to 25, and we co-design spaces of possibility. So coming back to the idea that, how we engage children and young people in aesthetic creative learning and artistic expression, to reimagine approaches to learning in spaces of possibility. So here, the children who are 3 and 4 are asking those big questions, philosophical questions. How can we bring the outside inside? They've just been for a walk to the botanical gardens in Bath. And I got a phone call at my desk and the children wanted real grass. So there we go. Andy Kemp at the back, the photographer, working alongside Deborah Jones, the artist, and co-designing the learning experience for them, with them, alongside them. And you can see their documentation on the wall on the left. And on the right, a child then said, how big does a map have to be inside it? So in that context, in the morning, we then papered the classroom with a map so that they could be inside the map, and they created that as their own learning environment. And like you, in wherever you are in the world, we all have this kind of place-based learning invitation. So we're lucky here with Salisbury Hill on the edge of Bath to invite the children. These are 5-year-olds from the local school climbing up Salisbury Hill and then meeting these beautiful rabbits on the top of the hill made by artist Edwina Bridgman. And that invited a whole journey back to school and for the rest of the term. And the project was called How Can We Tell Stories Without Using Words? So using all of the art forms and words, of course, as an art form. So the role of artists is really important. So here, with the inspiration from an artist like Pina Bausch, but for the children to then have permission to find and follow their fascinations. So that really is the provocation that came from the conversation with Ken. So Ken, how can we invite children to co-design their own learning so they have agency and follow their own interests? And that, so here you can see in the middle, he came down to the university. This was a group of 8-year-olds working with Ken and one of my postgraduate certificate of education students on the right, Sam, working with Professor Anthony Head in the middle. And the children co-designed this marble run. So they were using coding, they were using drawing and painting and montage and collage, all sorts of art forms to then project onto our large media wall in the university. And then other examples in the bottom left where children who are older, 11 and 12-year-olds in a local secondary school in Ridlington, in conversation around the world on Skype with young people from Serbia and Spain and Rwanda, asking those questions: what is learning? What is teaching? What is creativity? And on the right, my students in the top right, taking over a gallery. We papered the gallery to have an in-service opportunity for the students to work with teachers in local schools. And in the middle, the back of the gallery, we papered with Dotty paper. This girl is called Dotty. And Professor Alf Coles co-designed an invitation for the children to follow their fascinations around number. So this inventing, obviously, trigonometry. And then taking children to the art school to see our degree show and so on. So at that point, the charity was probably about 9 years old. And so this was about 2008-9. And this child who had seen our work, and she'd actually seen my manuscript of the first book we wrote, which was called Researching Children, Researching the World. And she was jumping up and down, as children do when they're fizzy and learning and excited. And she said, "Penny, you do love being an artist, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "I do." And I said, "What can you tell me about what's good about being an artist?" And she said these 5 things. So immediately, I just said, "Please, can you write that down?" And this became my invitation to pursue a PhD. So she said, "Have a great imagination and you'll have great ideas. Be positive and don't worry if you make mistakes. Be good at playing. Be thoughtful. Art is about everything." The wisdom of a 7-year-old. Incredible. So she's credited in my book. And so this little girl, Bo, not her real name, but she was fascinated with landscape and pattern. And then each child pursued a kind of body of work. In fact, I made each child a book that they had at the end of my PhD as a gift of their work. I worked with the same group of children for 5 years and documented all their learning. So every Wednesday, they got an artist in their school. I don't think I ever told them I was a teacher, but they know now. And then the idea that this boy, Jay, not his real name, he was fascinated by mountains and monsters. And we had regular exhibitions and invitations to the parents to come in and experience the work. So here you can see the workshop where the children are talking about each other's work together. I worked with about 15 children each afternoon every Wednesday for 5 years, and then studied several of them in much more depth over the time. So this creative space was just a pop-up space. It was an old meeting room for parents we redesigned. We invited artists in. Roger taught the steel pans. There's Richard Long on the right. He came in to talk to the children about his work on journeys. Mita showing the children her henna painting and so on. So that experience of being so intensively involved with understanding children's learning My book, by the way, is called Children are Artists, so I will share that in a minute. And there is an online version that's in colour that's probably better than the hardback, but don't tell Routledge. Oh no, this is being filmed. So that whole depth of learning about understanding children's identity as artists was a conversation with the director of the Egg, with the pink skirt in the middle there, and the local head teacher, the tallest woman in the photograph, who sadly died of cancer in 19. But this was a project which is in its 15th year now. So it was born in 2010, and we're still working with the Egg Theatre. In fact, Kate's probably one of my best friends. We have the best arguments, but in a brilliant way, on behalf and with for young people, that we want the best quality artistic experience for them. So this is a project called School Without Walls, where we take children out of school for a whole term of learning, so 6 weeks at a time, where they're in residence in the Egg Theatre in the city as a campus for learning, working with my students, artists, a psychotherapist there. This particular school has 50% children with English as an additional language and 20% children with special needs. But they have freedom of the city, so all in safeguarding groups, using the city as a campus, and then they're following their inquiries and their interests. So being in the cafe, understanding that context, keeping a sketchbook and recording and reflecting on their learning all the time. So here, tomorrow's first visit to the Egg Theatre with the beautiful velvet seats, and another child looking very carefully about how he records Toby Thompson's story, I Wish I Was a Mountain. And taking the children to see plays on the stage and talking to the theatre group. So here, 100 languages of expression, which is a phrase from Reggio Emilia in Italy, for the children to then try out those ideas themselves. So being inspired by arts of all art forms, and then learning particular skills, so professional photography skills and filmmaking skills, animation skills, drawing together, drawing individually, acting, performing, going up to the art school to use proper equipment, working with our professors and technicians, and then taking the children out to the woods and the forests. So learning in the fields and the outdoors, taking them to different areas of the city, places of worship, multi-faith spaces, down to the river and up to the hills, taking over meanwhile spaces for a gallery of learning so children can share their work with their parents and carers. And this is an area of Bath which is near the river, so the children were able to walk into the city. And the concept of School Without Walls has also travelled. So we've had pop-up events at Howser and Worth in Somerset. So here working with sixth formers on their manifesto for learning. I love that. Everyone has imagination, space to experiment, freedom to create, to be inspired, to be expressive, no judgment, make mistakes, art is everywhere. Please add to our manifesto. I love that. And then here on the right, 5-year-olds actually in residence in the gallery for a whole week, with one of my former art specialists as their teacher, bringing them into this space of inquiry, these spaces of possibility where they have imaginative freedom. And the city of imagination, our landscape city, here again, 8 and 9-year-olds co-designing these large-scale canvases about the blue and green of the city, perspectives of the city from the 7 different hills. And that is now a permanent piece of artwork in their school. So I'm also lucky to work with Andrew Grant, who designed the super trees in Singapore. So he's the founding director of Grant Associates, and one of his mantras is putting nature and imagination at the heart of design. So over the last 14 years, we've worked together since he's designed the super trees, you can see here on the left. And each year we take over a familiar space and we reimagine it with the community. So the education, cultural, creative community, and thinking about the deep themes that we're researching together. So Forest of Imagination is a long-term public pedagogy project, really, a public engagement project that is, again, inviting these experimental sites of learning for these spaces of possibility to emerge, but also to really think about pedagogical change and pedagogical innovation. So creative pedagogy and creative and reflective pedagogy is right at the heart of our work. So this was 12 years ago. We took over the historic gardens at the art school. We're actually now on the river with the art school, but this is now our education building. And so on the left, those design students in the School of Design. Matthew in the middle is now one of my lead designers, 12 years on, and he's paid properly for all of his work. And on the right-hand side, our education students, one of them is a head teacher now, and the other is doing a master's with us. So co-designing spaces, really putting attention on the importance of nature, nature connection and imagination in all our lives. And taking inspiration from children's ideas. So here a 7-year-old had made a drawing of a rabbit and she wanted it to be the same size as the obelisk. So Andrew took that as an idea and developed it and then co-designed this beautiful recycled plastic rabbit, which stood as high as the obelisk, that she could see her ideas manifest in the city. And Toby Thompson, the international spoken word poet now, he was the artist who designed I Wish I Was a Mountain. He's now touring around the world with his work. I've worked with Toby since he was 3. He's now 30, showing my age. And then in 2016, it was actually the year of Brexit. So in the middle, it's 1,000 butterflies, everybody different, everybody on the move, everybody welcome, designed by Professor Anthony Head. And on the left, Andrew and Peter Clegg, who's director of Fields and Clegg Bradley Studios. You may know Alec Clegg's work. He set up Bretton Hall in the UK, and he was devoted his work to art and imagination and the importance of nature in education. So on the left, the baobabs and the blue-eyed black lemurs on the right. Andrew and Peter now have a research station in Madagascar, saving the baobabs and the blue-eyed black lemurs. So that these deep themes around having these imaginative solutions to the kind of existential crisis that we find ourselves in, especially with the ecological biodiversity and climate crisis, thinking about, well, how can we show up in the world and live more lightly on the land? How can we think on behalf of nature? So here, Field and Clegg Bradley Studios, architects working alongside children in the local gallery, designing pop-up houses of imagination. So here the children, I might have mentioned, so we changed the name of the charity from 5x5 to House of Imagination because it was a space of inquiry, a space of possibility for children and young people to work with creative professionals. So this was manifest in 2017 with the children designing this cocoonery in the outside of University of Bath, which is a lovely, beautiful meadow, bushy Norwood next to the American Museum. And then in 2018, we took over the kind of heart of the city around Kingsmead Square and on the river, where we designed, so Matthew and his colleagues in the design studio designed drawing machines. Andrew designed, again, a recycled plastic pop-up space for a dancer to be in residence. We worked with the whole event, we worked with a local special school. So one child was actually, she could only blink. She was in a flatbed wheelchair. So we made it fully accessible for her, and then it was fully accessible for everyone. So that beautiful kind of underwater sea creature that emerged popped up in the square. And then Claire Day's 1,000 trees made of clay. Jess Palmer made a maze to invite children and families to draw inside next to the river. And then COVID hit. So that was a kind of a chance to reflect and pivot to a digital space. And this gesture for one of our artists, Dave Webb, he offered this vine. Matthew Leese and Dave were kind of in the virtual space collaborating, and then we invited everybody. In fact, mine is here. Everybody made an offering for the forest. Mine was a vine of hearts, not dissimilar to the COVID wall, but we were also looking at the processes embedded in creativity and imagination and thinking about how these kind of aesthetic, creative learning and artistic expression kind of opportunities were emerging. So we were looking deeply at the kind of processes of observing, inventing, taking risks, being playful, being curious, solving problems, making connections, communicating ideas, and constructing meaning. And there's only a few. There's 100 more. So we teamed up with a 24-hour conference with Chris Anderson and Ted Countdown. We have a project called Earth Songs with Mitch Turnbull. Alf Coles, Professor of Maths, as I mentioned, he worked with Field and Clegg Bradley Studios to design a mirror maze that actually then came into fruition, into reality. We often use the phrase making manifest, making creativity visible. We were invited to be part of a research project called Expanded Performance with the Watershed and Bristol and Bath Creative R&D. We work with BBC R&D with Andrew Amundsen, with Oliver Wallace, Kathy Hind, and our artists working on the concept of the Rabbit Holes Collective, where we're inviting young people to metaphorically fall down a rabbit hole and connect more deeply to the natural world. So we design these beautiful adaptive podcasts based on deep water listening and falling down the kind of spaces of mosslings. So more on that later. But this very short film will show you some of our processes in the forest. So this is with Andrew Amundsen, who works in Berlin, with Olafur Eliasson and Wim Wenders.
A scalable Christmas tree for public spaces made up of smaller potted trees that are then planted after the holiday, taking a familiar form and filling it with new meaning. Together with Forest of Imagination and students from Bath School of Design, we've been using Imagine If as a tool for playful design thinking and how we could bring life to the living tree year-round. We met in a virtual forest to share our ideas. That's wonderful. You want to pass it on to someone else to share?
Yeah, I'll pass it on to Maggie. Imagine if we could create a space in Bath.
Imagine if the tree could change its shape and its structure.
Imagine if there was the most incredible sensory, real and imagined space that drew on all of the senses and also brought in some sensory tech, so you were in an immersive environment where you could feel the raindrops.
And we developed these ideas further using new creative and collaborative online spaces.
And getting people emotionally invested. And almost like if you created an installation at home with your kids or as a family sponsor, like a section of the tree, a community project.
Imagine if a Christmas tree wasn't just for Christmas, but for spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Up all year round. Imagine if it was a habitat for local wildlife and insects, growing native wildflowers and plants, attracting bees and butterflies.
And the beautiful thing is that Rose's design is going to be a real thing. So this must have been 21, and the theatre was empty because of COVID, and Kate rang me up and said, "Help, Penny, I've got an empty theatre. How can I entice people back in?" I went, "Easy, Kate, bring a forest inside." So together with Rosie and Andrew, Sasha and Bala Ekabena, Charlie Brentnell, who sadly we also lost to cancer, but in his memory, this is a beautiful structure, the living tree, and around it are those 100 orbs designed by Roxana Vilk and the Squid Soup Collective. Each of the orbs sings the songs of the forest, and the raindrops falling and the leaves rustling, the mycelium network, the roots of the forest talking to each other. And we brought the real forest in. We borrowed a forest from a local architect. We watered the ferns every day, the mosses, and kept the spiders happy. So it was a beautiful moment. And Margaret Heffernan is one of our, you might know her work. I've been doing a lot of work with Margaret. I'll talk about later on embracing uncertainty. But she came and I've just been on a call with her this morning, and she came and she reflected on this being such an important moment, not only post-COVID coming back into cultural spaces, but inviting children to think on behalf of the planet, to think about their role as stewards of the environment, not forests as scary places, but places of adventure and possibility. So here on the right, Roxana Vilks singing the songs of the forest. She was brought up in Iran, but is now living in Bristol and collecting lullabies from across, I think, 56 different languages in Bristol, that she collected lullabies to sing back to the forest. And local schools visited in their safeguarding bubbles. And we created in the studio upstairs an immersive space with Lucy Cassidy, one of our School Without Walls artists, so they cross over, where she designed this beautiful space which was called the Society for the Protection of Magical Creatures, where children could adopt a creature in the forest and look after it and then record it through obviously their imagination and a linked all safe website. And so the second iteration of the Living Tree brought together the mirror maze that Andrew and Marcus Rothney and the team at FCB had designed over COVID. So it became a second manifestation in the theatre where we created these beautiful mirror maze spaces. So there is a film on our website if you want to follow up, but that's probably too long to show now. And then in 2023, the following year, we were invited to take over the assembly rooms in Bath. So you may know that it's a 250-year-old Georgian building, and it was a meanwhile space that's now taken over by the National Trust, but Tom Bowden invited the whole team to assemble in the forest. So here Perry Harris's beautiful illustration to think about how we can work alongside the more than human world. So we had the assembly rooms for a month. We brought the community's ideas into the co-design of the forest. So we worked with Morag Myerscough, who's a dear friend and a role designer for industry. She enlisted ideas from the community to think on behalf of nature. This was an installation, a pavilion made of bamboo called Birdsong. You know, we need to act now. We are nature people. I think that beautiful invitation. So I think just to reiterate, our approach is very much invitational, it's negotiated, it's about imagination, immersion, ingenuity, inquiry, all of the I's, and those kind of pedagogical characteristics that really optimize freedom, agency, choice, and imagination. So here Andrew Grant had designed the beaver's den, which is where I broke my arm. A child jumped up in front of me and I had the choice to crush his little hand or jump, and I did, but it's better now. So here the space of beaver's den that is life-size and larger than, where children could climb in the den and experience the river, which was a space blanket, and creatures made by Andrew's team, the kingfisher and the beaver. And on the right hand side, we brought 1,000 grasses into the ballroom, a piece that Andrew Amundsen and FCB Studios made called Wandering and Wandering Ways. And then Margaret Heffernan donated her fallen beech tree. So we created a henge for the experience where we brought community groups in for music and arts and discussion and roundtables, and now that henge is back in Margaret's garden. We also seeded the idea of a community kitchen. So a couple of my friends were just sitting in my garden thinking about reflecting on COVID and what we could change. And one of them, Helen, in the bottom middle, said, you know, why don't we have a community garden? Why don't we have a community kitchen? So now Rob on the right, in the bottom, he is the director with Helen. And this is a CIC now, a community interest company in Bath, and doing brilliantly well. They're part of each of our Forest of Imagination events. And this structure was designed, we called it the Hedgehog. It was a forest canopy, so children, people, families, local visitors, residents, community groups could come and celebrate food outside, but also learn about kind of healthy eating and a plant-based diet. So joy is essential. And then last year we were at the Holborn Museum again. We were there for 2019 before COVID, and then back again. last year. We wrapped up the Holborn Museum with a biodiversity ring and invited artists and educators, our creative professionals, our researchers, our students, our families, local schools to participate in a really beautiful event. This on the right was a piece called The Climate Spa, designed by Film Clegg Bradley Studios, and the concept, the space of playful awakening. And then on the left, there's a wonderful installation called What Can You Learn from a Drop with Matthew Leese. Yes, I also have to credit the work of Simon Sharkey on the right, who designed the concept with them. And then on the kind of the penultimate day, we worked alongside the theatre group and Key from Catalonia. We had more beautiful making with Pepper Pixley and Claire Day, and thinking about our relationship to the natural world. So ecological imagination has become very strong in our work, and thinking about how we nurture that kind of ecological citizenship. So children and young people gathered together from Bath in the southwest and Bolton in the northwest, and we had an earth vote together where the children and young people made banners, thanks to the work of Naomi Lord on that. And then Dave Webb and Wayne Lindsay designed a digital forest of imagination, which we're going to extend this time as well. This year we're developing this. We've been given the egg as an incubation space to design a digital quilt that kind of curates the green and blue of the city. So that's really exciting. And then lastly, just to talk briefly about our current project. So this is a new project. Well, I say new, it's now in its third year, I can't believe it, called Playful Green Planet. So seeded in the forest again, but in partnership with the RSA, the Royal Society of Arts. Joanna Shakir, who's the head of design and innovation at RSA, and taking Andrew's phrase, Andrew Grant's phrase, designing as we are part of nature, not separate. And I think that Playful Green Planet is a beautiful project that invites 3 to 11-year-olds and their families, so 0 to 11 really, to then think about their nature connection and their social action, where the children then become the imagination directors. So we've got pop-up sites at the moment in Dundee and in Hull, and new ones in London and Derby, and soon to be back in the southwest as well, Bristol and Cardiff. So it's about cultivating children's climate action and social activism. It's about nature connection, community engagement and creative opportunities. But longer term, it's about a greener and fairer, I would say, vision for education. So really thinking about this concept of ecological citizenship. There's a beautiful film on the website that I can share with you as well. And then this year, if you are in the UK, Mary, you're going to have to travel. I think if it would be wonderful if you could come to our pop-up event at Entry Hill. So we're rewilding an old golf course in Bath with a long-term vision of having a permanent art and nature park. So a beautiful butterfly house designed by Peter Clegg, and a series of installations designed by our whole kind of educational, cultural, creative community. Many of our artists have worked with us for many years, but we also bring on new artists of all disciplines each year. So we have landscape architects, environmentalists, ecologists, designers, mathematicians. It carries on. So working with Vlad Glavno, who I mentioned, he's professor in social psychology at Dublin City University, we've been really thinking together about the concept of collective ecological imagination. So we were part of the collective imagination practice community and had a series of research meetings. We had a hybrid research event at Hawkwood College, the Centre for Future Thinking in Stroud in the southwest, where I have a fellowship in imagination. And we've co-designed an article in the recent International Journal of Art and Design Imagination Let me find it so I can actually show it to you, because it has the beaver's den on the front. So do have a look at that. International Journal of Art and Design Education special issue on imagination, which I co-edited. And then lastly, as I said, I've been working with Margaret Heffernan. She's incredible. She's my hero. But also I've been on tour with her. So she published a book, which I actually happened to review, and it was excellent. And so then I proposed to Margaret that we had a live project with both our universities working together. So Margaret is a professor of professional practice at the University of Bath. And so with her MBA students, masters in business, and our graduates, our MBA students in arts management, but also our well, I was going to say fine art graduates, but they're all art forms. So we had various, well, 7, I think, events where Margaret was on tour with her book launch, but we created 2 multimodal events at each university. It was a beautiful moment, and that's what I was talking to her about this morning. We're writing up an article, but follow her on LinkedIn and Substack. She's incredible. And then lastly, the project that I think Molly has gone on maternity leave, but a beautiful project at the Royal Academy of Arts that we'll pick up when she's back or in her place, where the Royal Academy are really championing the idea of imagination as a serious kind of concept to think about. So imagination is worth teaching. Art is a serious subject. I couldn't agree more. And then to end, and we'll open up to questions, I'm a big fan of Ursula Le Guin. And she says, it is above all by the imagination that we achieve perception and compassion and hope. And interestingly, Ursula Le Guin's word for world is forest. So on that note, I will share my contact details with you. Just be aware that I get far too many emails, but I will answer them in my stretched time. But all our projects are on the website, and most of the examples have films with them that are associated with each of these websites as well. So thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much, Penny. I feel exhausted by the incredible number of projects and the imaginative and aesthetic conception of so many different things, and of course putting children at the center. Just wonderful. But I'm sure that there are lots of people who'd like to make a comment or ask a question, or not just me. So, I think we're probably, I did suggest you put things in the chat, but we're small enough if you'd like to just unmute and make a comment or ask a question of Penny. Penny, perhaps I should start. You did ask me to remind you about Ian and imagination and creative arts and imagination society. Yes?
Yes, it's hot off the press, so I can post it in the chat, or Anna would have it. But Michael Anderson, who's obviously one of your directors, so he's on the group as well. We've set up a new group called the International Arts and Imagination Network. Ian, my neighbour has a dog called Steve. It kind of made sense, right? So it's easy to remember. And we have a beautiful event. Our second event, our first event was in April this year, and our new event, next event, is the 25th of September. It's sold out, as in it's free, but the tickets went in 24 hours. So what we've tried to do now is release some more, because it's a global event. Obviously, it's across all continents, all nations, and everybody's welcome. It's not a membership, it's a movement. So we want everybody to be involved, and it's about the future of education. So this particular event is on creative activism and what we can do every day to make a difference. So a bit like our event at the Holborn last year, a million small acts. What can we do every day to think on behalf of this beautiful planet, but also to think on behalf of our future generations? And I think you're right, Robin, the child at the heart is absolutely important to all of our work. all of the work is for everyone. And I always say, I mean, yes, it looks like a lot of projects, but actually my line manager teases me and says, you just do the same thing every day, Penny, you just call it something different. And absolutely the values that underpin why we do what we do, that's so important to us. And I think that's where, you know, we're hoping for a revolution in our UK context, not an evolution of the curriculum. We've got to get back to why more progressive principles are important, especially in arts education, but in the whole of education. My lovely friend Scott Bolt talks about the child being the curriculum and the community being the school. It's so simple, but that's the best way around. I don't believe in a package delivered content-based curriculum. I don't believe in grades and tests either. I think it's about intrinsic motivation and a love of learning.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, who would like to comment?
Could I just jump right in with the framing question? Penny, the forest is everything in what you're describing there, but the communities you want to connect with seem to, well, they spread from being very urban to being much more rural. So can you outline, have you found there are differences in the way groups respond to that forest framing based on where they're living? And if so, do you need to make any adjustments or fill in any gaps or reframe anything depending on the environment the children are coming from?
That's such a good question. And yes, it is something we pay attention to. So for instance, the very first forest was inside and outside. So we had a birch forest inside the art school and we had a co-designed forest outside in the historic garden. So the relationship between inside, so that the gallery was outside, but also the forest inside. So it's kind of, I think it's what James Joyce talked about, that notion of aesthetic arrest. When you see something, you go, wow, that's incredible. It's that moment of connection. So it's like the children coming into the theatre and then witnessing the living tree. If you look at the film on the website, the first sound is a boy gasping. Wow. You know, and that's what we want learning to be like, that kind of fizzy learning. And I think we have had events all outside, like in 2018, we were right in the heart of the city, but the year before, and by the river, but in the year before, we were in a very tranquil meadow next to Bushy Norwood, called Bushy Norwood, next to University of Bath. And Andrew and I and the team designed the whole experience based on Darwin's Sandwalk, so that for each 10 minutes of contemplation, you would walk and then meet an experience. So Martin Ware designed a beautiful soundscape in a dell. We had a citizen science activity looking at bugs. We had an experience designed by the National Trust, which was all about our connection to home and our link to the meadow or the savannah. And then inside in the gallery, we had a giant ant's nest that the children could crawl in and experience what it was like to be a queen ant. So it's very, I think, to answer your question in a brief way, it's really wherever we are, it's about our connection to nature. And not that we're set, you know, we are nature, we are the forest. Our DNA is in the forest. And this year we are at Entry Hill, which was an old golf course, was a farm. And now we're going to rewild it, and we're using the old greens to then co-design installations on each green and invite the whole community in, and every community. Importantly, the event is free and it's for everyone, and every community, no matter what people's background or circumstance, everybody's welcome. And we work closely with Bath Welcomes Refugees, we work closely with the volunteer groups, with the local residents, and particularly schools in underserved communities, schools in areas of socioeconomic deprivation. And Bath's misconceived as a white middle class city. It's not. It's got where our art school is, 1 in 3 children in poverty, 1 in 4 with mental health issues, many, many, many different cultural backgrounds. So I think it's important that we are meeting people where they are. We're showing that unconditional positive regard for everyone. That's a really important value in our work. And I mean, and I know, Robin, you used to be a primary teacher, and you know this, that when children feel nurtured and respected, when they've got that self-sovereignty, when they've got that sense of self-esteem and value. It's a lovely quote from Reggio Emilia, when children are perceived to, when children see themselves as artists and inventors, I think it's authors and inventors, but when children see themselves as artists and inventors, then their motivations and interests explode. But you can change the word artist for mathematician or scientist or philosopher. When you've got that sense of, that's the title of my book, that learning identity as artists, but across the whole curriculum as well. And the curriculum isn't over there, it's here. It's right with the child. It's about their world. It's the concentric circles, starting with the child and their family, the school, community, environment, the world. And if only we could get back to a values-based curriculum approach, we'd have, I think, a healthier society.
For sure. Yeah. Sasha, would you like to unmute and read those lovely comments?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, look, Penny, they're just such wonderful examples of community imagination and I guess collaboration. And I'd be really interested to hear if you've had some particularly memorable feedback from children, that maybe recent experiences or projects you've worked on where children have just really embraced what you're doing.
Absolutely. In fact, that's probably going to be my next book. It'll be actually going right back to 25 years ago when we started the charity, and then obviously School Without Walls emerged 15 years ago, and the forest 12 years ago, and now some of the children visited the forest when they were 8 or 10, and now 20, 22, they're coming back and they're still working with us. And I think it's that, the theme of our event in 2019 was called Lifeline. It's the creativity you find in yourself as a child, in your connection to nature in particular, but also the importance of the arts and imagination, where then that stays with you through life. And one of the children that came into the forest last year, he just didn't stop bouncing up and down. That is a fizzy sign of learning, isn't it? It's like learning is embodied and on the move. It shouldn't be sitting down at desks and just using worksheets. In fact, with my students, I ban that, and I think the idea that this child said, Penny, I just want to be in the forest every day. I want this to be my school every day. I mean, that just says everything. And I have a whole, if you go to the website, each year we document the learning and we write a case study. So those are available, or they're on the first link of my, I can probably find that link and put it in the chat if that would be useful, Anna, or you might. But yes, so we do document children's learning, and that the deep documentation and the focus on observation was very much at the heart of our work, was inspired by the practice in Reggio Emilia. So I'm still in touch with a lot of colleagues there. In fact, I was there just before COVID hit with Peter Moss and Gunilla Dahlberg, who've written extensively on reconceptualizing childhood education, and for actually what would have been Loris Malagutz's 100th birthday. And sadly, we lost Carlina Rinaldi recently, but she had a similar role to me. She worked at university. She was an artist, an atelierista, but also a pedagogue, so a pedagogista. So yes, I mean, I could recount so many different quotes from children, but that was, one of them. And I think on the film, you'll see, if you watched a film from 2022, one of the children actually reflects, I think they're 10-year-old girl, and she hasn't lived long in England, and she said, it really makes me feel calm. It reminds me of my grandpa. And just that idea of connecting to her home and her country of birth and her family and the forest, bringing those stories. You know, Nora Bateson, who she says this book, if you haven't seen it, is amazing. It's called Combining. Nora was the daughter of Gregory Bateson, who wrote Steps to an Ecology of Mind, and Nora talks about learning being like a forest. In fact, I'm happy to show you this image because she's 24 now, so she doesn't look like this. But this is my daughter, pre-digital, reminds me that children learn like a meadow. They learn like a forest. They learn like an ocean. Everything is connected and entangled in these spaces of possibility.
Wow. Is it she or shy? Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Robin. Yes, it's Shy. Hello, Penny. Thank you for absolutely brilliant presentation. I was thoroughly re-inspired that I am on the right path for early childhood, but also just education, moving into that much more studio-based learning. I am working mostly with children with trauma-affected learning, and your School Without Walls project just sounds absolutely brilliant for those who are quite disengaged from their learning. And I know that I'm currently working in the US, actually, in Orlando. I'm here to do my Montessori teacher training. But planning to go back to Australia, and I know we have some roadblocks with regard to opening that mindset that the classroom does not have to be four walls, does not have to be sitting at a desk. And for those children who are disengaged, disenfranchised by their learning system, the possibility to pursue their passion and their interests, I believe, will have that reconnecting effect. What we have is logistics and planning that can problematize that enormously. And so I'm really curious to understand how you approach this as a program, and how I could possibly overcome the inevitable OH&S that I will face of, okay, how do I present this to my leadership team? How do I present this to my managers, that a group of 5-year-olds or even the high school children that I work with can undertake this, and not just as I said, not from a safety and logistics perspective, but the pedagogical planning. Sorry, am I not clear there?
I mean, there's lots in your question, but I think we could, I'm very happy to have a follow-up call, but just to give a short answer. I mean, School That Walls is in its 15th year, and it is emerging, and it was a co-designed pedagogical approach. So it was based on my approach in my PhD, but it was then shared with the Egg Theatre, and the asking those questions, you know, why do we have to go to school? Why can't we just go to school at the Egg? How do we then have curriculum coverage? And in fact, what we do, because we co-design the curriculum with the children and young people alongside artists and cultural professionals, and we document everything, we mentor the educators and the artists. We have weekly, if not daily, reflection meetings. It's intensive. And but once that structure, if you like, is in place with all the key ingredients, and we have got a map that I can share with you, or I think it's on the website, that show that connection with the young people and the artists and the cultural centre, and the question at the heart. So the question that children bring to, you know, being in the city as a campus for learning. And I think out of that, the children go beyond the curriculum, because they're transforming in their learning capacity. They're you know, they're owning their own learning. It's about, I've written an article for the Arts Council Creativity Exchange called, and it's all about, in fact, I think it's on the Helen Hamlin Centre for Pedagogy site, but it's on my link. I've just got my links ready to drop for you. So I'll do that quickly. But I think importantly, it's about agency and relationships. So it's the things, it's about imaginative freedom. It's about those spaces of possibility where children don't feel prescribed to, they feel invited. So I talk to my students about, you know, if they're training to be teachers, then this is about possibility, not prescriptions. And I think we meet all of the requirements of the so-called national curriculum, but we go beyond because the children own the learning. And that's the difference. So we've had, I don't agree with our standard assessment tests, but we've had children achieve higher grades than in other schools because they've been involved in School Without Walls. The same with GCSEs, our exam systems in secondary school. The secondary school we work with, the 3 years with the year 7 to 9, when they did their GCSEs, they got the highest scores ever. And it's those kind of things. We don't do things for grades. We do things because we want to nurture more confident, creative, curious learners. That's the difference. But I'm very happy to say, I mean, what I haven't mentioned is money. It does require funding. And I did say that, you know, from my principle of every child, no matter what their background or circumstance, should have access to all of the arts all of the time, everything has to be free. Because if you start charging for it, then it excludes certain people in the community. We don't want that. So I also have to do a lot of fundraising, which I don't enjoy, but I mean, I do have more words in my fundraising folder than my PhD. But what happens is that, for instance, this year's Forest, we didn't get our Arts Council funding, but the community have risen to the challenge. And we have now, you know, brought together a beautiful offering. So we know that we can go ahead in 2 weeks.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Jill, did you make any? Sorry, Penny.
One last thing on the trauma-informed practice. I think that's really important note, because we do work closely with Betsy de Thierry, who's based in Bath, and she set up the Trauma-Informed Learning Centre. So I've presented at various conferences and vice versa. So Betsy's learning is coming back into the project as well. And certainly, you know, we, in our community of artists, we also have art psychotherapists, drama therapists, music therapists, and so on. And in fact, I employ an art psychotherapist at our university to work with my art specialists. So they look particularly at mental health and well-being and connection to materiality. And she's doing a PhD, Helen Jury, she's doing a PhD in that at the moment. So sorry, Robin.
No, that's fine. I thought, Jill, you might like to make a comment.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you, Penny. Yeah, I just found that really fascinating. I loved and lapped up everything that you were saying. You put it so eloquently. It really resonates deeply with both the art that I make, but also I developed a visual arts program for like Arts Life, which is like a local community-based program of different varying arts for children from families. It's subsidised for families in needs. Anybody can come. And it's just the way I naturally taught them. And they would say I'd get them to come out to canvas one by one, and I'd actually call them an artist. And this is artist, you know, and use their name. And just to watch them flourish within that freedom is amazing. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much. And I also homeschooled my children with the very same approach, and for probably the very same reasons as well.
Yeah, that's really important, Jill. That's a lovely reflection. I think, you know, we talk about human flourishment, but in the more than human world. And I think I was the same. I don't really want to send my child to school. I just wanted to hang out with her. But actually, I found a school that was first name terms. It had a little farm, you know, tiny farm with pets and a wild area. And that was where, you know, I was able to work alongside the children for 5 years as well. So it was a very community-based school. In fact, my former student is now the head teacher.
Wonderful. I did try kindergarten a couple of times with my daughter. I tried a couple of different schools. I can't. But yeah, this just fed into everything that I actually believe and live, or try to live. But you were much more eloquent with it than I am. So that was lovely to see it.
Well, I mean, you know,
well structured.
I'm also happy to share that I also was a fairly disaffected teenager. I didn't really want to go to school. My best friend died when I was 16, and you know how that is so traumatic at that age. And I used to get to school and get to the school gates and turn round and just draw in the park. And my art teacher recognized I was disaffected, depressed, whatever the word. And he enticed me back in with a metaphorical thread. And it was funny one day because I had been in the park, and obviously, in those days it was called playing truant. And I walked home, and I got home at 3:30, as I would if I'd been to school. And my mother was at the door, and he was just arriving with my sketchbooks. I was thinking to myself, oh no, I've been found out. And he just greeted me with a smile. He said, I brought your sketchbooks, so don't forget, you've got to get them ready for your mock exam next week, or something like that. So he didn't say anything to my mum. And then he brought me back in. We had conversations in the studio. In those days, we shared our Marmite sandwiches. We couldn't do that these days, could you? But or maybe safeguarding in place. But and I kept in touch with him until he died. And he was the reason I came to art college. He was the reason I came to Bath. I'm an alum of it was called Bath Art Academy and then turned into Bath College for Higher Education, now Bath Spa. But yeah, it just needs one person to trust you, respect you.
It does just need one, doesn't it? That's a beautiful, beautiful story, and I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your friend. I have often referred to my homeschooling as I found a way to perfect my truanting. And then, I perfected it and made it legal for my own kids.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I have one really quick question, if there's time. I know we're kind of over time, but thank you for sharing your story, Penny. That was so reaffirming to hear that there's interested people, all of us here, and we feel like we're on the right track. I'm interested if you offer any learning to teachers. I know all of this is very children-centered and learner-centered, as it should be, but do you provide any opportunity for teachers to kind of come along that journey with you, or for them to kind of reimagine their own pedagogy in a way that can impact and affect the work that you're doing as well?
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't say that. Yes, it's the golden thread. I mean,
yeah.
So I think I said that, we co-design everything alongside teachers, educators, artists, cultural professionals, parents, so that kind of flat level democratic space for intergenerational learning is really important. So the strands of professional development are integrated into every project. So with School Without Walls, we have CPD events, continuing professional development. We call them Red Days, days for reflection, exchange and dialogue, where so I've got one tomorrow at the Egg Theatre. I've got all of my artists and makers coming together with the partner educators in an empty theatre to co-design a digital quilt in the space. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's the beautiful thing about it. So we're using Entry Hill as the provocation around curating the green and blue of the city, and which material would you like to use. So some people are making creatures, other people are projecting images, other people are, I don't know what's going to happen, but that should be the kind of the learning environment for children and young people, but also for teachers to find their own creativity as well. When I was working at Tate Modern and Goldsmiths, I set up something with the Arts Council and the National Society for Education, Art and Design called the Artist Teacher Scheme, which is still going, to get artists who are teachers back into their own, no, the other way around, teachers who are artists back into their own creative practice, but But once you follow those lines of professional development, I mean, for me, also, I have my own kind of professional learning. And Mary came yesterday. I host these online seminars once a month, and they're just fantastic professional development opportunities. And now, I mean, yesterday, Mary, what was it? It was Australia, Alaska, Italy, Ireland, the UK, the States. It was incredible. Italy, yeah. It was amazing. And I think this is what teachers need back. They need that agency and autonomy. We don't need a law. We don't need a national curriculum. I wrote 56 pages in response to our current curriculum assessment review, and I haven't even had an email acknowledgement.
Surprising.
Yeah. Thank you. Mary, would you like to?
Just thank you so much, Penny. As always, I get so much from anytime I hear you speak. But a couple of things are striking me. One is when you talk about teachers, and in the Irish context, I've worked on a programme supported by the Irish government called Creativity, where we co-design and co-facilitate workshops with artists of all disciplines for teachers. In beautiful cultural spaces all around the country, and they're absolutely wonderful, but they're elective. So their CPD for their subject for the content of the curriculum is compulsory, and then the CPD that they can attend, which is completely free and is absolutely amazing and fully funded by the Irish government, and is absolutely wonderful. But it's not. It's elective, so they come at weekends in evenings. So my own experience of it was that you had a high proportion of women of a certain age, women who were finished rearing their children or who were not looking after parents anymore, perhaps, smaller numbers of men. But then we also have, we also have programs where we are now beginning to have programs which we call TAP, Teacher Artist Partnerships, where we give time and space for teachers to work with artists to develop a relationship. And then there's a consultation with the young people before the artist goes into the classroom. And it's a relationship between the teacher and the artist that happens, so that when the program of artistic engagement in all sorts of disciplines happens in the classroom, the artist isn't in the classroom and the teacher leaves, or the teacher's marking at the back. It's something that happens in relationship and in consultation with the young people. But I suppose and I know time is up, but just what I think is at the heart of this is how we view teacher professionalism. And I am a post-primary teacher. I feel so passionately about these disruptions and resistances that need to happen in terms of how we teach our young people. But I think, for me, I need to try and work within the system and look at what teacher professionalism is and the tensions that there are in teacher professionalism between managerial, that's the, assessment, standardization, measurement of our young people and of our teachers and the pressures that they come under from that, and the occupational professionalism, why they became a teacher, what's in their heart, what drove them to want to become a teacher, what experiences did they have? You spoke about your student that is now a head teacher somewhere. The experiences that she had as a child inspired her to want to go and be in classrooms. So, yeah.
So good segue, Mary, because I now have to go, I'm 1 minute late. I have to go to Creative UK to a roundtable that's addressing exactly that. I've put in the link. So yes, let's follow up, Mary. Mary's our next speaker in October. Mary, find the link and put it in the chat. I haven't got it open because I'm on my desktop, not my laptop. The International Arts and Imagination Network, we'll release some more tickets soon if it says it's closed. But thank you so much, Robin and Anna, for hosting this, and lovely to meet you all. Do follow up, but give me a wild reply because we've got a mad few weeks now.
Well, it's our thanks to you, Penny, for a wonderful evening, an inspiring time together for all of us, I think. And I think your comment about needing to think every day what we can do to make a difference and to inspire and imagine and to think about alternative and a reimagination, if you like. So thank you so much. And
So thank you so much. And
real
I must say, yeah, keep in touch, everyone, and have a look at our films because they're really good explanation of kind of what we do. And there's links on each of the websites for those. But I'm disappearing back to the UK context. Keep in touch. Bye.